Chapter 10:16, There's a Monster. A black coffin was launched from Horn's flagship, and after making a parabolic arc in the air, it plunged into the soil of Star Island. Naturally, the Huashu Kingdom Alliance did not miss the commotion here. However, as long as the other party did not deploy Cardalus, then on the surface there was no violation of the rules of the game. From the battleship, Horn informed everyone on the island as soon as the Soul Reaper set out. He told them to be careful and avoid encounters with the Soul Reaper at all costs. Because if they encountered that guy, he would kill everyone, friend or foe. The only good news was that the command center had given him orders to kill Chaos. So he would make Chaos his first target. The huge coffin is almost completely buried in the ground, with only a short section of it exposed. However, the commotion here has attracted the attention of the nearby mutants. Several kilometers away, on top of a tall building, space suddenly warps. A man in his 30s, dressed in the naval combat uniform of the East Sea region, appears here. He looks at the rolling poisonous miasma in the distance and immediately reports to the command center. A suspicious object launched by the enemy has been spotted, landing in the north of the city of Caledogen. Li Tianyang glanced at the map and confirmed the location. It was still a long way from the direction of Misty Valley. He frowned. Those guys in Colombia, what was it that they launched? One of the staff officers beside him said, "First of all, we can rule out the mutants. Because of the way it was launched, even a reinforced body of a mutant would find it hard to withstand. The weapon is the most likely possibility." The distance between General Horn's ship and the landing site of the mysterious object was more than 10 kilometers. A person was placed in an iron box, launched like a bullet, and then fell heavily from a great height. Even a pure augmented mutant like Bai Li Changqing would lose most of his life force if he didn't die. Therefore, judging from common sense, it could not have been a mutant. Li Tianyang strongly agreed with the staff officer's view. Since it is something that the other side needs, then we must not let them get it. The current battlefield situation is favorable to our side. As long as we prevent their reinforcements, the source of God will be ours. As he said this, his gaze inadvertently glanced at the Jiangnan regional officers such as Situ Xian. I'm afraid that in the back, the Jiangnan region, or to be precise, Chaos, will become their biggest competitor. Situ Xian smiled and said nothing. Li Tianyang said to Bai Zhe, who had appeared nearby, "Keep a close eye on things and destroy that object on the condition that it is safe to do so." Bai Zhe, roger that. He looked ahead, where the poisonous miasma was surging, and could no longer confirm the object that had landed by sight or with his long-range equipment. So Bai Zhe gathered his equipment, took a special black rifle in his arms, and walked cautiously in that direction. However, all the way along the way, he did not notice anyone else in the vicinity. The expected mutant from Colombia did not appear. But out of obedience to orders, he still cautiously walked towards the mysterious object's landing site. When he got within 10 meters, he could finally see what the object looked like. A metal box, a dark metal box. Bai Zhe did not dare to be the least bit careless. He immediately raised the gun in his hand and aimed it at the box. Could it be some kind of deadly weapon? But why was it projected here? The possibility of a weapon of mass destruction is very small, and they still have people on the island. What the hell is this? Bai Zhe was very puzzled. He carefully observed his surroundings, and then took out a small metal box from the tactical backpack behind him. The metal box was placed on the ground, quickly cracked open, and turned into a small spider-like robot, which crawled towards the black metal box. The spider robot quickly climbed onto the metal box, shooting 2 red lines from the detector and began scanning the metal box. But just then, the metal box suddenly trembled violently. Hiss! A crack appeared in the box, and thick white smoke emitted from it. Bai Zhe did not hesitate, quickly using his supernatural powers. Black field. His pupils flashed with an extremely dark light. In a short moment, a huge black field appeared around him. Everything was invisible, and no light could enter this area. Only Bai Zhe himself could see everything that was happening in this area. The black metal box cracked even wider, making a crunching sound, as if something was slowly pushing it open. Baizé quickly raised his gun and shot. The black special rifle also uses origin bullets, which can cause significant damage to mutants. Bang! A loud noise came from the explosion, and the black metal box actually burst open. The heavy metal plates crumbled from the ground and flew in all directions. A naked, monster-like figure emerged from the ground. His body was an eerie white, as if he had been soaked in water for many years like a zombie, with twisted muscles bulging, giving the impression that he might explode at any time. His head in particular looked like a large basketball. Such beings were not uncommon, but they usually only appeared in the bodies of the dead. It was called the Giant View. However, the body of the Soul Reaper was not filled with rampant microorganisms and gases, but rather an overdose of medicine. Or perhaps it could be said that he was some kind of being between the dead and the living. The origin bullets Baizé shot at him cracked and hit him, but they didn't even scratch the skin. The Soul Reaper had just been unsealed, and his eyes were full of confusion. But when he felt the bullets on his body and saw the living person in front of him, his confused eyes suddenly filled with bloodthirsty murderous intent. Baizé felt his back go cold. That monster in the black domain could not possibly see him. But the eyes of the Soul Reaper were definitely staring at him. This was a terrifying sense of perception. Moreover, the pressure emanating from the Soul Reaper made Baizé feel as if he were seeing a demon. "Nuo! There's a monster, there's a monster." The voice suddenly stopped and quickly turned into a sound of electricity. The figure of Soul Reaper instantly appeared in front of Baizé. In a flash, his huge right hand crushed the rifle in Baizé's hand and the arm he was trying to protect, and he grabbed his throat. Puff! With a hard squeeze, Baizé's neck was snapped like it had been forcefully clamped in iron pincers, and he was sent flying like a bullet. This captain of the mutant fleet in the East Sea region was crushed like a bug in front of Soul-Sucking Soul. Chapter 1017, Demon Squad. Soul-Sucking Soul crushed Baizé, the captain of the fleet in the East Sea region, like a bug. Without the slightest hesitation, he threw his corpse aside and scanned the surroundings with cold eyes. Inside his head, he had been instilled with an upper-level order that overrides the will to kill a guy named Chaos. Soul Reaper did not sense the presence of Chaos, and a look of confusion appeared in his eyes. He was just naked, walking in the cold snow at -60 degrees Celsius, searching for his prey. By the time the command center of the Huashu Kingdom confirmed the death of Baizé, his men had already disappeared into the vast poisonous miasma. From beginning to end, no one knew how Baizé died. Li Tianyang's emotions became more and more suppressed. Seeing that the Jiangnan region had won consecutive battles, while they had suffered defeat after defeat, this feeling made him lose face in the entire command center. But at the moment, he had no other choice but to be incompetent and furious. He didn't even know what was hidden inside that metal coffin. All the command center could do was to warn everyone to be careful. As time passed, teams of mutants approached the Misty Valley area one after the other. Most of the teams had obtained source spirits during their explorations. Anyone who survived had made a huge gain. It was only after this experience that the senior management of the two regions realized why Xinjiang region was able to obtain the power that surpassed the entire Huashu Kingdom earlier than them. In addition to their own possession of the most powerful weapons and military systems, it was also because they had discovered the source of God once in the Qinling Mountains. It turned out that the value of the source of God lies not only in its ability to help people break through the bottleneck of the delta level. The byproducts of the source of God alone were able to create a large number of strong people. Therefore, most teams had already begun to focus their main objective on hunting the source elves. Only Billy the Kid, the four spirits, and others still had their sights set on the source of God. However, teams like the Jiangnan Squad, as well as the mutants from other countries in the Allied forces, also understood that the source of God had nothing to do with them. Instead, they had a chance to capture the source elves themselves. Mackay City, located in the northeast of Misty Valley. Here was the Jiangnan Demon Squad. Under the leadership of Captain Lu Huang, they slowly approached Misty Valley. Because from experience, the closer they got to the source of God's core area, the higher the probability of the source spirit appearing. By now, their goal had become hunting the source spirit. The entire demon squad had a total of 12 members. This was also one of the few teams that were still operating as a group. As for the reason, you can refer to the Sky Dragon Pirates. In a battle between high-level mutants, if the level difference is too great, the advantage of numerical superiority is not a real advantage. On the contrary, it may become a liability. However, for the demon squad, their luck had been pretty good. From the time they landed on the island until now, they had not collided with any of the allied forces of the mutant organizations. The most likely reason was that Zhang Yi had killed too many allied forces of the mutant, attracting most of the attention. However, they could no longer maintain this good fortune once they approached the Misty Valley. Lu Huang walked through the poisonous miasma, followed by his tall and curvaceous deputy Captain Liu. As for the remaining 10 team members, they dispersed and searched for information around them. One team member stood on the branches of a large tree, looking at the energy detection instrument in his hand that was emitting a faint response. "Captain, there is an energy response in the southwest direction," Lu Huang nodded indifferently after receiving the information. "Just as we thought, the closer we get to the area where the source of God is located, the more this type of companion creature will increase in number." Liu smiled and leaned over, whispering in his ear, "Captain, but the further we go, the greater the possibility of encountering danger." "Ah, I know." Lu Huang's tone was as cold as ever. Although he was young, he was not stupid. But this was a rare opportunity to rapidly improve his own strength. How could he possibly let it slip? Along the way, they had found 2 source spirits. The demon squad's strength had been upgraded as a whole. As for him, his own supernatural ability index had now reached around 9,500 points. Of course, the supernatural ability index was a concept that required assessment by a professional organization. Only high-level mutants could judge it themselves based on their experience. If I can go even further and even find the large source spirits they mentioned, will I be close to Epsilon? A look of expectation appeared in the eyes of Lu Huang. In the end times, strength is everything. If one day I gain unparalleled power, even my ugly appearance will be recognized by everyone. He muttered to himself. The team member who had detected the energy fluctuations continued to ask, "Should we continue moving forward?" Lu Huang hurriedly said, "Don't worry. Everyone follow the original plan and advance towards the energy source in a decentralized manner. Be careful, the road ahead will become increasingly dangerous." A uniform reply came from the communication channel, "Yes, Captain." Amidst the thick poisonous miasma, a stream of light scattered like a shooting star, before galloping towards the energy source. Lu Huang looked back at his second-in-command, Liu. "Liu, you stay right behind me." His eyes were as cold as his expression, as if he was not interested in the world at all. His beauty was somewhat unreal, like a mask. Only when he spoke to Liu did he try to add some warmth to his voice. "I can already feel the breath of danger." He took a deep breath. "When I can't control my murderous thoughts, you must stop me in time. I'm afraid of how I'll look when I'm possessed." Liu's face broke into an incredibly sweet smile. She and Lu Huang looked like 2 polar opposites. She reached up to gather her long hair, and due to the 20-odd centimeters in height difference, when she spoke to Lu Huang, it happened to make Lu Huang face her broad bosom. "Yes, Captain." Lu Huang looked at her for a few seconds before silently turning his head and looking into the distance. "Let's go." In the depths of the thick fog, a huge pit had caved in. Judging from the surrounding buildings, it might once have been a huge underground parking lot. At the bottom of the pit stood a steel cage made of silver-gray metal. A small fire-red Pokemon was bound inside the cage, looking up at the sky blankly. And in the shadows, a huge monster was staring at the place from afar. Dozens of eyes grew on its head, and green liquid flowed from its mouth, already corroding and penetrating the stone slabs on the ground. The breeze was surging. That was the wind raised by the prey when it moved quickly. Among the surrounding buildings, wisps of invisible, slender, long white filaments were also affected. Chapter 10:18 IGA. The members of the demon squad quickly approached the area based on the detected energy response. The dense poisonous miasma was one of the biggest dangers here. It wasn't just because its toxins were deadly, but also because it could render most detection equipment useless. Therefore, it was impossible to judge the situation here from a distance. However, among the members of the demon squad, there were of course also good at reconnaissance. A mutant fell from the sky, his body floating like a kite. He landed on all fours, and his body suddenly swelled up. His stomach expanded several times, and his throat became flat and thick. Croak! He let out a croaking sound in the direction of the front. The sound rippled out in a fan shape, and everything it touched along the way was fed back to his brain. Although he could not see directly with his eyes, he was able to determine the basic situation in front of him through the echoes. The sound waves quickly swept across the area in front of him. He discovered the huge open pit and the source spirit inside it, which was radiating fiery energy. The frogman was overjoyed and immediately reported his discovery to the overlord. Target found, confirmed to be a source spirit. However, only one has been found. The overlord frowned. Only one? Those things usually move in groups, and it was very rare to find only one. After pondering for 2 seconds, the emperor immediately ordered, "Be careful, it could be a trap." The frogman smiled and said, "Don't worry, Captain. We haven't found any enemy traces in the vicinity, so we're safe." As he finished speaking, in the thick poisonous miasma, a strand of barely perceptible white silk floated quietly. The next moment, the earth beneath the frogman's feet cracked open with a loud noise. White silk threads like steel cables shot up into the sky, binding him tightly. The frogman looked down in horror and saw a deep pit in the ground beneath him. At the bottom of the pit was a huge speckled spider. All the white silk threads were spider webs it had spun. The dense cobwebs had already covered every part of the pit, covering an area of hundreds of meters in all directions. This was a huge trap. The frogman's face changed as he desperately tried to break free, but his whole body was tightly bound, and there was no way he could break free from the cobwebs, which were stronger than steel. Enemy attack! The members of the demon squad, who were not far away, saw this scene and reported the enemy attack to the emperor while leaping over to rescue him. However, the moment they appeared, from the depths of the dense fog, as if ripping open a canvas, a group of guys dressed in gray-brown combat fatigues emerged from the dilapidated forest. Their combat fatigues were very distinctive. They were fully covered, but their eyes were exposed behind the tactical goggles. They carried 2 samurai swords on their backs, dressed like ninjas. They used camouflage to make themselves indistinguishable from their surroundings. Some ninjas were so skilled at stealth that they even managed to evade the frogman's surveillance. A fight was imminent. Since both sides had confirmed that the other was their sworn enemy, there would be no unnecessary words, and it would be a fight to the death. Not every mutant who had landed on the island had set their sights on the source of God. Mutants who weren't as powerful would be thinking about how to maximize their own interests. For example, this group of neon mutants had set a trap, waiting for the Huashu Kingdom mutants to fall into it. As long as they could get the reward from the Huashu Kingdom mutant army, it would also be an extremely generous reward. Lu Huang was the first to react, and he realized that they had fallen into the enemy's trap. At this moment, there was a strange distortion on the 2 dead trees around them. As if the trees had shed a layer of skin, 2 ninjas jumped down with their swords in hand. Lu Huang's eyes were cold and terrifying. He opened his right hand, and a hideous mouth quickly split open in the palm. Then a long white bone drilled out of it, and it was a large sword made of polished bone. Facing the attack of the 2 men, Lu Huang's body exploded with black air currents. He flashed, crossing past the 2 ninjas. Puff! Puff! Blood gushed out like a waterfall, and the 2 ninjas, along with their swords, were cut in half. A large amount of blood mixed with broken internal organs fell onto the ground with a clatter, much like the pig offal that flows out when the belly is pierced during the New Year's pig slaughter. It was a neon Iga-ryu ninja. Lu Huang's eyes turned bloodshot as he said in a cold tone. Liu, the deputy captain, hurriedly came over and said, "Captain, how did you figure that out?" Lu Huang said, "Iga-ryu ninjas only think in terms of using their swords." Liu placed her fingers in front of her mask and blinked her cute big eyes. With her playful movements, the majestic figure in front of her kept swaying involuntarily. So that's how it is. The battle was about to break out, without any unnecessary nonsense. While Lu Huang killed 2 ninjas, the leader of this group of guys also appeared. He was a tall mutant wearing a white combat uniform. His build was 2 heads taller than the other ninjas, approaching 2 meters. When he emerged from the ground and suddenly struck, the 2 members of the demon squad didn't even notice. There was only a flash of white light, and their heads flew high in the air. This was how ninjas did things. They only cared about the result, not the method. Even Tanaka Ruishi, the head of the IGA School of Ninjutsu, one of the 2 major schools independent of the Neon, still liked to use sneak attacks to gain results. The moment he appeared, Lu Huang sensed his presence. Strong individuals could always attract one another, especially when their power was unmatched in the battlefield, and they would unconsciously make way for one another. At this level, it was difficult for lower-level mutants to play a significant role in their battles. A hideous smile suddenly appeared on Lu Huang's cold face, his eyes nearly splitting with excitement. That was the expression of a demon encountering perfect prey. "I've been holding back for so long, and finally I've met a worthy opponent. This is interesting, really interesting." Liu looked at Lu Huang's murderous eyes and hurriedly came over, gently put her arms around him, and smiled like a caring mother, consoling him, "Captain, calm down." Her body emitted a soft white light, enveloping Lu Huang and slowly calming the blood in his eyes. However, she could hardly calm the strong fighting spirit in Lu Huang's eyes. After landing on the island, he had also been eager to establish a name for himself and kill his enemies. Especially after receiving the news of Zhang Yi's successive victories, it had made him itch to do so. It was only because of the reminder of the second-in-command Liu that he had not taken the initiative to find the enemy. But now, the enemy had come to him. What was there to be polite about? Chapter 10-19 Yamada no Orochi. Tanaka Ruishi held 2 swords in his hands and walked step by step towards Lu Huang and Liu. His gaze under the mask was cold and terrifying. He wasn't walking fast because he was sizing up Lu Huang and Liu. Jiangnan Region, Demon Squad, Captain Gluttony. There is no information on the woman next to him, so she is probably not a captain. At this time, Emperor Liu also received a notification from the command center. Gluttony, the guy opposite you is the leader of the Neon Ninja Organization Yamanaka Orochi, Ruishi Tanaka. The 2 of them obtained some information about each other from their respective command centers in the first instance. Both sides were extremely cautious, and no one attacked without authorization. They only made a basic decision after confirming the other person's codename, Supernatural Ability Index, and abilities. Ryushi Tanaka, Ability Index 9,500 points. Lu Huang, Ability Index 9,400 points. The 2 of them were considered to be evenly matched. The only difference was that Lu Huang had an additional deputy, Liu, by his side. Ryushi Tanaka's gaze lingered on Liu for less than a second. In a battle between captains, the presence of a deputy might not necessarily have a positive impact. Generally speaking, there were only 2 scenarios in which it would be meaningful. One was the ability to complement the captain's abilities. The other was a support-type mutant that could strengthen the captain. Liu obviously belonged to the latter. Lu Huang reached out and took her under his protection. Liu's gentle gaze became sharp. She slowly raised her hands, and 2 white beams of light connected to Lu Huang's body like ribbons, gentle as the embrace of a caring mother. This was her protective ability, love and sincerity. Tanaka Ruishi raised his dual swords. Lu Huang also raised his great demon sword and pointed it directly at Tanaka Ruishi. Both were experts in close combat, and without any nonsense, they charged at each other instantly. Among mutants, the most tragic and fierce battles always took place between those who specialized in close combat. Because only they were able to fight to the death, using their swords to strike at each other. If either party shows any weakness, it will be instantly exploited by the other, and the outcome will be death. In other words, a battle between two melee-type mutants usually ends in the death of at least one of them, or even in the mutual destruction of both. Greatsword against twin blades. The power and speed of both men were pushed to the extreme. Every clash between the sword and the blade sent up a storm, knocking the surrounding poisonous miasma several kilometers away. Sparks flew in all directions, and the sound of clanging never stopped. Liu stood in the distance, providing support for Lu Huang the entire time. Tanaka Ruishi's swordplay was superb, but Lu Huang's swordplay was equally sharp and ruthless. The two touched in midair, and less than a second later they landed on the ground before rushing up again and colliding. With each brief exchange, the sword and the sword collided thousands of times. Tanaka Ruishi's gaze fell on Liu. You have a support mutant providing protection, is that right? Then, I'll kill your support first. He pulled two red metal balls from his body and threw them at Lu Huang. Lu Huang's brows furrowed, and he did not use his sword to catch them, nor did he dodge. Because Liu was right behind him, he could not dodge. So, he opened his mouth and let out a roar. His expression suddenly became incredibly terrifying, his face seemed to be distorted, and a strange feeling was faintly visible beneath the skin. The roar surged, and the moment it swept past the two red metal balls, they exploded. Bang! Bang! The metal balls exploded directly, but there was no explosion as expected. Instead, a large amount of red smoke appeared and began to fill the area around Lu Huang. Tanaka Ruishi, holding his twin swords, slowly disappeared into the dust and smoke. Invisibility. He held his breath, trying to make his breath fade, and then sneaked around trying to kill Liu first. But of course, this trick could not escape the eyes of Lu Huang. He and Liu were old teammates, and they were also well-known lovers. He knows better than anyone that Liu will be the enemy's priority during a battle. Tanaka Ruishi sneaks past Lu Huang's side and quickly approaches Liu. Did it work? Was it that easy? Tanaka Ruishi himself didn't expect things to be so simple. A moment of hesitation appeared in his heart, but since he had already found the opportunity to kill the opponent's support, there was no need to hold back. Tanaka Ruishi quickly unsheathed his sword and slashed at Liu's head. Swish! The blade whizzed past, Liu's pupils constricted, and the blade magnified infinitely in her eyes. Bing! Just as the blade was about to close in on her head, a long sword suddenly appeared in front of Liu, blocking Tanaka Ruishi's slash. Tanaka Ruishi was momentarily stunned. He had imagined countless possible outcomes, including the possibility that Lu Huang would block the attack. Even if that had happened, he could have continued to use Liu to contain Lu Huang and keep him at bay. However, he never imagined that it would turn out like this. Because the sword did not come from Lu Huang, but from the assistant in front of him, Liu. Liu held the long sword in her hand, and a strange white light flashed in her eyes. Do you think it's that easy to kill me? When she spoke, two voices came out, one belonging to her and the other to Lu Huang. 2. Captains? Liu unsheathed her sword and swung, and Tanaka Ruishi reacted quickly, blocking a few of her blows in haste before retreating at top speed. Lu Huang and Liu stood 10 meters apart, both of them holding weapons in their hands, and even their stances were almost identical. After careful observation, Tanaka Ruishi finally vaguely sensed some of the other person's abilities. The woman named Liu was not of captain-level strength. Because when she had displayed her powerful combat strength, Lu Huang's true self had obviously become weaker. Can the power between her and gluttony be borrowed and transferred to each other? Liu's ability, love and sincerity, was that of a lover. Between lovers, they love and adore each other, are close and can share everything about each other. including strength and supernatural powers. This was why Liu, as a support character, could appear on the battlefield in an open and above-board manner. Because at any time, she was able to borrow power from the Liu Emperor. Even when the Liu Emperor lost his combat power, she was able to temporarily take over the Liu Emperor's functions. Tanaka Ruishi muttered, "What an interesting ability. I really don't know how you found such a great woman. But it's about time I showed some real skills." A thick white mist appeared around his body, and he thrust his swords into the ground. A moment later, with a loud roar, a huge, hideous white monster appeared on the battlefield. A snake demon covered in white barbs and with 8 heads roared as it looked around. Chapter 1020, The Great Winged Demon. Ryusei Tanaka revealed his own abilities. A beast-type ability user, the Yamata no Orochi. A giant monster hundreds of meters tall appeared before Lu Huang and Liu. Lu Huang's gaze tightened, and from the monster in front of him, he felt an astonishing sense of oppression. Ha 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 ha. He covered his face with one hand and burst out laughing. A towering black aura overflowed from his body, rising up like a pillar of smoke. At the same time, visible changes occurred to his body. His body grew rapidly from 1.6 meters to more than 2 meters in the blink of an eye. His pale skin began to take on a dark color, his arms and claws grew longer, and his palms in particular had lost their human appearance and turned into the claws of a demon. The delicate face, as white as a porcelain doll, also appeared to be cracking, as if it would shatter at any moment, and large amounts of black gas spilled out from the cracks and wrapped around his body. Pung! 2 huge demonic black wings pierced through his combat uniform from the back and spread out violently. Lu Huang's wings unfurled, and the entire person soared directly into the air. Because of the love and sincerity ability, Liu also shared the ability to fly, and 2 transparent wings grew behind him, following behind him. The Demon Squad Captain, Lu Huang of Gluttony, is a special attribute ability user. Ability code Great Winged Demon. The test was over, and both Tanaka Ryoshi and Lu Huang had liberated their true powers. Lu Huang's right hand, the great demon sword made of white bones, also dyed a dark color as if it had a life of its own. Dong black flesh and blood wrapped around the sword, and a hideous vertical pupil appeared at the hilt of the sword, the ice still spinning non-stop. Kill! The 8 heads of Yamata no Orochi let out a fierce roar, and then they just tilted back, and charged at the great winged demon in midair. The 8 heads were covered in sharp white barbs, like 8 long swords. Lu Huang, holding the great demon sword, soared up into the sky, facing the 8 heads of Yamata no Orochi head-on. The clash of power was so tragic. He gripped the great demon sword with both hands and slashed at each of the 8 heads that came at him. The scales on the snake's heads fell off as the sword's blade swept past. However, there were 8 heads in total, and each was as fast as thunder. If viewed from a distance, it looked as if a giant pile driver was constantly pounding at the tiny figure in midair. Lu Huang's eyes showed no fear, but instead a layer of redness spread across them, making him more and more courageous. However, in this process of wrestling, he still suffered greatly. He only had 2 hands and 1 sword, while the opponent had 8 heads. Hiss! He struggled to cut open the neck of a snake's head, and the blood splashed out like a waterfall in midair. 2 snake heads to the left and right had already surrounded and attacked. Tianma quickly dodged their attacks with a flick of his wings. But from above and below, more snake heads attacked. Tanaka Ryoshi's ability index was originally higher than Lu Huang's, and even with Liu's blessing, it could not give him an advantage in battle. If they were both melee-type mutants, then the slightest disadvantage would be infinitely magnified. Boom! 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 After Lu Huang was hit hard by one head, the continuous attacks from the other heads came without a moment's rest. Lu Huang was thrown hard, falling to the ground like a cannonball. Liu followed closely behind, her eyes glowing white. Love and sincerity, love is dedication, giving everything you have to heal the one you love. Lu Huang sank deep into the ground, but Liu quickly healed his injuries. However, Tanaka Ruishi would not give him a chance to catch his breath. The 8 heads were aimed at Lu Huang and Liu like pile drivers, and then with a simple backward lean, they pounced down like crazy. Lu Huang was lying in the deep pit. After seeing this, he raised his right hand. The pupils of his eyes turned an even more intense red, and his normally normal pupils were twisted and turned, turning into terrifying vertical pupils. A black and red light rapidly condensed in the palm of his hand, and finally turned into a palm-sized sphere. Magic cannon. This power exploded from the palm of his hand, shooting at the body of the 8-headed serpent in the sky. There were indeed 8 heads, but there was only one body. The 8-headed, 8-tailed serpent was caught off guard and took the attack head-on, immediately sending its body reeling backwards a distance. Black smoke swirled around its chest, but after the smoke cleared, no wounds were visible. Only the scales there were slightly deformed. Beast-type ability users of the beast race will obtain the purest and most powerful abilities. Lu Huang soared up from the ground, and Liu followed closely behind him. Will be at a disadvantage in close combat. With a body like his, even if you hit it with a sword, it might not be fatal. What's more, we don't know which head is its true body, Liu reminded Lu Huang. Lu Huang stared at the huge strange snake and said coldly, if we can't find it, just cut off all 8 heads, right? Upon hearing this, Yamada no Orochi just sneered, arrogant brat, I'll bite you to death now. It slightly adjusted its body and charged again. Its attack method was very simple, without any fancy stuff. It was to crush its opponent with its pure, powerful strength and huge body. Lu Huang's fighting style was also extremely simple, head-on combat. He held the great demon sword and soared up into the sky. Although he was fighting like crazy, he had not lost his senses and was always watching for the weaknesses of Yamada no Orochi. There must be one main head among the 8. But how was he supposed to find it when each head looked exactly the same? If all else fails, let's roll the dice. There was not much time to think during the battle. Lu Huang chose the safest way to fight, to gamble. He left the decision to luck and attacked one by one. If he was lucky enough, he might be able to kill the opponent in one go. Drink! Yamada no Orochi attacked again, and the 8 heads launched a furious attack on Lu Huang. Lu Huang raised his left hand and said, Magic cannon. The black and red magic cannons condensed in his left hand blasted towards the heads of the 8-headed serpent. This time, several hundred magic cannons flew out of his palm. All 8 heads were attacked. This kind of attack that disperses energy cannot cause significant damage, but it effectively slowed down the 8-headed serpent's offensive. Then, holding the great demon sword, Lu Huang selected the 3rd head from the left and charged at it with flapping wings.